My name is Andrew Taylor, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the second season of Stick With It. Last season we had the fantastic host, Mark Hoffmeyer. Without his tremendous work and the fantastic interviews and guests he had, we wouldn't be back for a second season. This season, some amazing guests, so I'll invite you now to settle in, relax and enjoy Stick With It. Welcome back today to Stick With It, APA's podcast for pilots. Today it's my very great pleasure to welcome back Captain Andrew Stewart, retired, who's a great supporter of APA, a great friend of ours, part of our welfare team. And by qualification now, he's no longer a 747 captain, he's a psychotherapist. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Andrew. There's a lot of Andrews in here. Yeah, nice to see you.
So we had overwhelming reaction to the last time you spoke to Mark Hoffmeyer about things pilots aren't very good at talking about.
Yes, I have heard that. In fact, I think Nada was saying that when a pilot presents at APA Welfare and they're struggling with something in training, she says, go and listen to Andrew Stewart's podcast, which
absolutely
is fascinating. But yeah, very, very interesting. And I think what was interesting to me was that one of the pilot's wives, they were listening together, turned to him and said, he's talking directly to you. So that was very interesting. And so he called and we had a bit of a chat. But yeah, nice to be of help if possible.
Well, what was interesting after I listened to the series, I thought, Andrew's the person's talking to me. So I felt exactly the same thing, believe it or not. And nobody likes to admit that we have that soft side. And we've spoken before, so we did some talking before we came here about we're very black and white, we're very analytical. You spoke to Mark about being very A-type. So I said to you, you went from being a very black and white person, so a jumbo captain, to no longer being a jumbo captain, where black and white is just the world we live in aviation. Now, what colours do you see now, Andrew?
Yeah, look, I would think, using that analogy, I see a lot of different colours that I never really saw. And I think we do, you've often heard the phrase, we're in a bit of a bubble as Qantas pilots. And I think that's pretty true. But then, looking back at the arc of my life, once you get into your 60s, these younger fellows, that'll happen to you one day, you get into your 60s, you're looking for, I tended to see a bit of a theme, and my theme was really about, it was more an internal theme than an external theme. So there's all this stuff going on the outside, but I was struggling with a lot of things on the inside, and I think that sort of drove me in the direction of exploration, really. And as a result, it just, I guess the main theme of that journey is self-discovery and authenticity. And as a result, I see a few more different colours.
But I think I'm not black and white, but anybody who sees me in only black and white. So how can I become more conscious of when I'm not required to be black and white, of being grey and lighter grey and off-white and things like I don't think I can ever be 7 colours. I'll be happy with black and white and some shades. So some simple tips. How can I go from being that black and white, Qantas pilot when I'm at work to being perhaps a little grey and off-white occasionally?
Yeah, I guess if your intention is there to see these other colours, it's interesting analogy.
I'm just trying to, it's hard for us because we're so analytical, but I don't want to be analytical. I want to talk about the things we don't normally talk about.
Look, and I think we can get stuck in that cycle of perhaps being in that black and white world until we get hit with some kind of a hammer. And I think, it's nothing special. That's just what happened to me a few times. And I think when that happens a few times, it really just wakes you up and you start to pay attention to what's going on and pay attention to, why things are the way they are. And I tend to kind of, reframe everything in the past that used to be very, very unpleasant and just see it as something that life is offering in a way that can be viewed, can be taken differently. So not maybe swimming upstream, the kind of the image of the salmon swimming upstream. But I think there's luck involved, and by luck, some people would call it bad luck, but things that happened to me that were fairly traumatic, that then just starts an investigation. I mean, I felt very different from the beginning as a young person. I was brought up in an Asian country in Hong Kong and then sort of ripped out of a friendship circle and a family circle and everything and brought to Australia. And I was half Chinese, which doesn't kind of look like a white guy. But as a teenager, I looked much more Eurasian. So when I came to school here, I was bullied, and the kids have already formed their groups and whatever, and you slot in, and, in second form or whatever it was, you're an outsider from the start. And so you're not seeing, as you would say, perhaps black and white. There's all sorts of things that you're seeing. But as a teenager, you're trying to conform and fit in with everybody. And that's basically what I did. I sort of tried to fit in with everybody and did everything that I thought was the right thing to do, basically by my father. And then I slotted into that whole, black and white grey area, which eventually became a Qantas pilot. But yeah, I think just to go back to answering your question, I think it was just a matter of being hit over the head with a few serious incidents in my life that woke me up and started me thinking about that there are other things that are important in life that I'm just not looking at or paying attention to.
So all the aviation training we have to be black and white. In fact, you can, once you realise you don't have to solely live in that monochromatic world, you can be retrained. Once you're somewhat aware of what it is, then perhaps, I can see a colour occasionally.
Yeah, and it depends on what you want. I mean, a lot of the work that I do is based around, people who've struggled or who are suffering. So there's something going wrong. So if your life is kind of soldiering on wonderfully, then you may not be interested in seeing other colours or whatever.
Yeah.
But I kind of, all the things that I've seen over the last 20 years, at some point, something's going to come along to shake you up, and it'd be nice to be able to be ready in a little way when that happens, because it can be quite a shock. We see that a lot with guys that have soldiered on in Qantas for years, and they come up for some kind of training and they fall over, and they've never experienced that before, and it's a big shock. So yeah, I think it's very helpful to be a little bit more interested or curious about the rest of the world. The world that's outside the world of
fantastic thing.
Outside of the Qantas captain world, or Qantas pilot world. Yeah, curiosity, absolutely.
So we chatted about before we came in about when you went to the UK to study post-flying. And I said to you, my 20-year-old had come to me and said that she's suffering from imposter syndrome. And you said, well, funny you should say that. Have I got a story about that? Because I suffer it every day. I put on my uniform and I look at myself and think, seriously, how did this happen? I have confidence in my ability and I know I can do the job, but you really have to look at yourself and go, am I quite comfortable in what's actually happening here? So, and you said, well, I've got a story about that. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So look, it's very, very common. And this is, one of the things about that you discover in therapy, that a lot of these things are very common, and we think we're the only one. And that's actually part of the downside of why people come to therapy, because they think they're the only one. But yeah, relating to that story about imposter syndrome, we did, when I got to Oxford, I, for some bizarre reason, managed to get in there. And on the first day of, you put on the gown and you go down to the fantastic place where all the famous people went, the building, which I cannot remember the name of. But anyway, the Vice Chancellor of the university came up and she said, okay, so how many of you people feel like you've got imposter syndrome? And everybody, you turn around and pretty much everybody had their hand up. And she said, that's exactly right. You've all got it. And so did I. And I still have it. This is the Chancellor of, Vice Chancellor of Oxford University. But then she went on to say, this is the best university in the world and blah, 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 blah. But so everybody's got it. I see it all the time. And I certainly had it. And it, this comes, is related very much to, the types of therapy that we can do when somebody presents with a problem that's related to failure or insecurity or shame. And that's the narrative that's been built up over many, many years. So we've got this internal story or schema about, who we are and how we present to the world. And that can really impact us when we're under a bit of stress. And I think the job is quite stressful, and we see that a lot. And there's about it. Most of the pilots know about it. There's a lot to know about being a pilot, and a lot of changes that occur all the time. So you're always going to be up against that, that barrage of information regularly coming at you. And then we get tested all the time. So that imposter syndrome gets a chance to come up regularly. And yeah, it's very common.
And I can't remember whether it was on TikTok or somewhere reliable like that, saying this internal voice, And it was about managing this self-doubt, saying you let the voice play, but it's about recognising, going, oh, no, I can hear the voice being negative. No, stop. You're not allowed, my internal voice is not allowed to be negative anymore. But you go through the process of recognising and saying, yep, that's that negative voice again. Or might have been you, somebody talk about it, and you say, no, stop. You're not going to be negative anymore. So it's almost a physical process of stopping your internal negative voice saying, no, that's enough of that. Now we'll just get on and be positive again.
Yeah, look, so that's part of cognitive therapy as well, or cognitive behavior therapy, where you start to pay attention to the thought stream that's coming through, and it's kind of difficult to do because it's the way we live in the world every single day. We think things and then we do them, thoughts, actions, behaviors, etc. So when you start to pay attention to that, and particularly when it's not helpful, you're having unhelpful thoughts, or, we might see them as automatic negative thoughts, we might label them as that. And what you tend to do, what you're trying to do is objectify them. So create some distance between you. Yeah, that's another story altogether. But the idea that we have of ourselves, so the self with a small s, and the things that are happening to the self, like thoughts and feelings, for example. So if you can objectify them and see them as things that are occurring, that are coming into your space, but they're not reality, they're just thoughts, then they can have less power, they can have less emotional impact. And one way of doing that is to, as you say, you can just say stop, or yep, I've seen that. I don't want to be driven by that negative thought. Or in mindfulness, we sometimes will just allow the thought to arise and just sit there for a while, and then if you pay attention to it over a long period of time, you notice that it always just will fade away. And one way to objectify it is to label it. So if you see a thought that comes up, I used to do this going to simulators and think, oh shit, what happens if I do that? Well, scary thought. And I'll just label that as a scary thought, or however you want to use it. And it tends to kind of, a little bit of humor, and takes the edge off it. So yeah, objectifying, decentering is what we might call it in therapy.
So that almost sounds like you need to be in a higher state of self-awareness, is it?
Yeah, it's self-awareness.
Can it be simple? Like, can you just start at a very simple place, and when you start feeling negative, you go, okay, I'm starting to feel negative now. Stop, please. I've had enough of that, and move to the positive again. Can it be as simple as that?
Look, it can be. I mean, in therapy, particularly with people with mood disorders like depression and anxiety, that's one of the first things that's targeted. And I think I don't know what I was saying to you, but, like if you have the flu, one of the symptoms of the flu is a high temperature, right? And so these days we can look at clinical depression. One of the symptoms of clinical depression would be this automatic negative thought stream. And so in mindfulness, and particularly we mentioned Mark Williams' book, Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy for Depression, one of the ways to disengage from that negative thought stream is to place your attention, the focus of your attention, into the body. So once you do that, and of course in mindfulness, one of the fastest ways to do that is to go to the breath, because you can actually feel the breath. Mm. So you start paying attention to the breath, and immediately breaks that chain of association with this constant negative thinking, which can really, people get stuck in this rumination if they've got a clinical depression type diagnosis. So to get them out of that, we get them to focus on the body, and that breaks that cycle. And also, we talk about, there's a phrase that some people think it's, how do you actually, basically being in the present moment, right? That's part of this mindfulness practice. And one of the reasons why we do that and we come to the body is that if you think about the body, every sense that you have, your taste, your sight, your hearing, your smell, it's all only and always in the present moment. So you can't taste now, the food that you had for breakfast this morning, you can only have that as a memory, that the taste is already gone. It was only there in that moment, right? And what that does, so when you come into the body and you come into your senses, so you try to feel something, whether it's the pressure of the back of your legs on your seat or the bottom of your feet, you're immediately coming into your senses and you're coming away from the thinking mind, and you immediately stop that, the mental time travel. You can only do that with thinking, right? So, and the reason we want to do that is because with anxiety, you're usually, rushing ahead to the future and worrying about something that's going to happen, and something you might be worried about in the past that's already happened. You'll be ruminating on that. Why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that, or all the negative things about that. And so when you come into the body, you immediately come into the present moment, and all that mental time travel stops. So that's part of the process of getting away from that thinking. That does take time and practice, but yeah, you can do it anytime. You can you can do it sitting in the garden, looking at the, at the grass or whatever. But it is a practice. It takes practice, sure.
It takes practice. Okay.
Like anything, like flying an airplane, right? It takes practice.
I know, but when you get semi-good at it, you forget about all the practice you did to get semi-good at it, don't you?
That's true. Well, to some degree, it becomes automatic, but it's why we have simulator sessions. We have, retraining. In therapy, we have the same professional development all the time to keep our skills there.
Are the issues we're seeing with PAN, because you're heavily involved with apial welfare and PAN as well, are they new issues? Do we have a generation of new issues caused by all sorts of things, technology and, the world's changing and things like that? Or are we seeing the same issues this generation that we had a generation before us, I guess? That's a very broad question. I don't even know whether you can have it. Yeah, look,
I couldn't answer that honestly. Having, if I'd been in the role for the last 20 years or 30 years, I might have been able to see that. I mean, I would say that we have a lot of common issues. So the main issue that I get is a training, failure or someone that's just had a few option Bs, and it's more about recovery rather than, we can talk about, how they can, what they did last time and how they compare next time. Yeah. But basically it's recovering from the sort of things they don't normally see. So they don't normally see themselves, feeling that shame of failure when all their mates have gotten through, and why is this happening to me? Everybody else has gotten through, that kind of pretty scary stuff. So there's a lot of psychoeducation that goes into talking about, what to expect when this happens, the reason why it's happening, shame, for example, which is just a natural human response to tell you that you're about to be kicked out of the tribe, or however you want to view it. So it's a protective mechanism. And a lot of these things are protective mechanisms. The threat system gets activated. That's a protective mechanism, and it's been going for, millions of years of evolution. So these are really great things that have developed over time to protect us. But then, the modern world that we live in, if that gets triggered regularly, say, for example, the threat system, and you get all that cortisol and adrenaline pumping regularly, that's when the problems can occur. We can see that in the literature, how it affects the brain and how it affects, the amygdala, which, it's like going to the gym, you're building up that amygdala muscle. And I'm not a neuroscientist, but from what I've read, it's at the extent of the prefrontal cortex, which means just when you need to be working your butt off in the simulator and everything's going wrong, if you've, been under chronic stress for a long time and the amygdala is getting going, then your ability to perform is reduced. So how did we get to that? So the idea of...
So interesting. I find it really interesting. So at work, we operate in,
people coming to me for therapy. Yeah.
With treatment. Yeah. But at work, I operate, 1 minute late, 2 minutes late. Time's very important. Timely decisions, yes and no. The black and white, as we spoke about, this black and white theory. I'm a little bit interested in some techniques of taking away so that I'm not like me at work, I'm like me at home. There's two different me's, I guess, where I'm far more tolerant of the kids running late or because at work we're so used to you leave at 9 o'clock, you leave at 9 o'clock. And my family's pretty used to it because I've been, they've had to put up with me forever. But not everyone is able to have such an understanding life away from work. So, that a process of saying, no, 9:05 is still okay. We will still get there by 9:20 where we're so used to leaving at 9 o'clock on the dot.
Yeah, yeah.
So again, is that, is it like you put your uniform on, you turn on that side of your brain, you take your uniform off and you go back to being a semi-normal person?
Look, I don't think so. I think if you spoke about that word curiosity before. If you start to get curious about what's going on, in your body while this is happening, I think that's one of the first things that was interesting to me. Why do I feel this way? Why am I so triggered by this captain that's, yelling at me, which...
I certainly hope that's not me. And it wasn't you when I flew with you. So it's interesting sitting in here. I don't have a watch on. I don't have my phone. There's no clock. I don't know what the time is. And we're so used to knowing the time. I wasn't uncomfortable before, but now I'm thinking about it and I'm uncomfortable because I want to pick up my phone and check the time, even though there's no reason to check the time.
Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah. And I'm only you talking about it now going, where's my phone? I want to grab it so I can check the time, but I don't need to know what the time is. I have no reason to know.
If you start to pay attention to that particular aspect, you'll notice how distracted you are every moment.
I
of the
can't
day.
listen now because I'm thinking about the time.
Yeah. And
you're trying to explain it to me, and I'm too busy thinking. I wonder what the time is.
Well, we can always
we don't
edit
have a
this,
clock
can't
in
we?
here,
We
no.
can just keep going and edit. But yeah, it's just one of those. It's the modern world is so distracted. If you think about every moment of your day, even if you don't plan anything, there's always something coming up. We're sort of leaning into the future. There's something happening in front of us that we're going to do, whether it's lunch or go to the toilet or whatever it is. And we don't put aside time just to sit and do nothing. I mean, that's one of the first things you learn about in mindfulness. You just stop, just absolutely stop. And then when you do stop, you notice how your mind just doesn't stop. It just keeps going. And you physically stop, and your intention is to sit and do nothing. And you see how it just runs off and has this, it's habitually doing this. We call it the monkey mind. And that's really great insight, because then you can start. I mean, this is all about focus. Now, we talk about focus a lot. It's, say, for a simulator session, you really need to be focused on doing what you're doing, rather than as a second officer. I always remember, did he see I just made that mistake? Somebody there writing away in the background. And I was constantly thinking about him watching me instead of being right in the moment with what I was doing. And with mindfulness, it tends to help you with that focus, concentration, and takes you away from, recognizing that there are distractions and basically not being distracted by them.
But the trouble was when I become focused for my simulators, I get focused on my sock drawer or tightening my sock drawer or filing those papers that have sat on the table for 100 years.
Exactly. And that's a great, I use that same example where, you start 3 days out from a sim or important sim, and you sit down. The moment you sit down, you start thinking about the box set of White Lotus or whatever it is that you could do.
Anything
right?
and everything.
Anything and everything.
Yeah.
And that's a clear example of how the mind is. It just does not want to do. We're so used to turning away from the unpleasant towards the pleasant. So if we're sitting here with a stack of books, having to do a simulator exercise, in our mind, that's not very pleasant. I mean, you could think of 1,000 other things you'd rather be doing, and that's where the mind goes. And so the most basic, simple practice of mindfulness practice is to sit there and basically find something to focus on, like the breath, but not for people who have anxiety, because it can be anxiety provoking, but something within the body or externally, a picture or a candle or whatever you like. And you hold your attention there. And what you'll notice, it's almost impossible to do. You try to hold, the intention is to hold your attention there, and it just wanders off again and again. So what mindfulness is, the training initially is just to bring your attention back again and again and again to the object 1,000 gazillion times. And that's how so it's basically mind training. So that when you sit down to do the study for that you're actually going to be focused well, because it's going to be darting off, and you bring it back and you bring it back and you bring it back. Yeah.
Well, doesn't Mark Williams talk about the periods where we actually focused are so short that if I added them all up over the rest of my life, it's only a very short time period. So if somebody said to you, you've only got 3 or 5 years to live, which he was talking about the time period where you're actually focused. And so he was saying that the greater those periods, if you can extend those periods by being, self-aware, that actually you extend the quality and the time of your life, because you have more time actually being in your life rather than being distracted and lost and wandering around.
Yeah. And I see that a lot. Well, not a lot, but, some of the patients I've had working at, the cancer hospital, they're facing the biggest existential question of their life, which is the end of their life. And they haven't got a lot of time. And some of them will say that, the richness of the remaining, since they were diagnosed and how much time they've got left, they're finally living life. We have all these years. It's fascinating. I think it's such a privilege and such an education to be with people who are really, really sick, because it just wakes you up. And rather than, you becoming more morose and negative about life, it just brings you into that, you see the beauty, everywhere, basically. So it's a really beautiful gift. I guess one of the selfish reasons why I like to work in that area, because it's so beneficial for me personally. I can take it to my kids, I can take it to my friends. So it's all relative, isn't it? Like, you only have a few years, as Professor Williams would say, and you can change that.
Well, that's what he was saying, that you can change that.
Yeah.
So what about being a better friend, a better colleague, a better work
What are you
mate?
saying?
No, well, I'm very happy to use me as an example.
Yeah. Sorry.
I spend lots of time with guys and girls who I'm remotely friends with, but we're not really friends. I spend time with them and we ask superficial questions, and I'd like to be a better friend to the people who I am a good friend to, but the people who I would consider friends, but not really. So I'd like to be mindfully a better friend. So some techniques about, because quite often I won't ask somebody what they do because I don't want to prejudge them by their occupation, things like that. Then other people look at that and go, oh, well, he doesn't actually care. He's not remotely interested in me, who I am or anything. So
that's an interesting story that you're creating.
I'm trying to be self-enlightened, and I hope somebody else, I am like that as well. So, that shallow conversation, how are you, fine, things like that.
Right.
But when we're talking about, especially a workspace, when we spend a lot of time alone, but we are with people a lot.
Yeah.
I would like, perhaps you could give me some coaching for me to ask some better questions that one allows me to get to know a person and to see whether or not they actually need me to be a friend type thing. It's not that simple. I know it's not.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It makes me the therapist in me wants to ask, are you getting feedback saying that you're a negative, you're not a friendly person?
Well, part of all that self-doubt, you always get that thing, wondering what other people actually do think about you. Where
exactly.
On the surface, they think, oh, he's a good guy or a good girl, but really, do they think that?
Well, I think if you ran around and asked everybody, what do I think of Andrew Taylor?
Well, that's not a question I'm not game to ask that.
Exactly. So I think that the point is, there's a lot of points, but one of them would be that seems to be coming up with what you're saying is a level of insecurity with imposter syndrome and all of that. And that really is about addressing our own, our own internal narrative. What's going on there to drive that? Because the idea, it doesn't matter how many people say to you, what a wonderful person you are, Andrew. It's not going to work. You can find a way to cancel that very, very easily. And people do that. And what we do, I see this in training. So if you have a low sense of self or you have self-esteem issues, and this is not about judgment or blame. There are so many factors that come into it, not the least of which is your genetic background. But environmentally as a child, environmentally as you're growing up can really impact how you feel about yourself. And that's really what we're talking about here. It's how you feel about yourself and what that internal narrative is. And that's the thing that needs to be addressed. And that's what, longer term therapy is all about. Just digging around and exploring that a little bit, but exploring that with, a compassionate and kind approach. Because there's still that, I see it as still that sort of inner 6-year-old Andrew in there looking for all the same things that he's always been looking for, wants to be seen, he wants to be heard, and he wants to be loved, all that kind of thing. And it's really, really important to get back to that and work out where perhaps there's been some area where that hasn't happened. And, it's ended up in this place of, I'm not sure whether this person likes me, or worse than that, having the belief that this is the case, and then getting confirmation in the world that it is the case. And you can do that very easily. And that's what people, if you have a failure in the system, I always knew I was a hopeless pilot. I'm never going to be any good, probably never going to be a captain. That whole negative thing will kick in. So you get confirmation of your insecurity over and over again. It's very easy to do.
So this is a question. Can I go to therapy thinking that I'm pretty well? Like I don't think I need therapy. Like, do people present like that, or is it very obvious when they come to finally pick up the phone and say, Andrew, I need to talk?
No, I think it varies. There's that terrible phrase, the worried well.
Okay. That's how I reckon I feel a lot of the time.
Yeah. And I think, there are a lot of, in fact, even I'll do a bit of an assessment. I mean, I'm not.
No, not now, please. No.
No. Yeah. With you. But if people do call up, or, I see people in this practice that I'm at, if they do, you can work out pretty quickly whether they're going to need some longer term therapy or whether there's just some kind of minor issue. And things like mindfulness or cognitive therapy can be very, very helpful. But for some people, it doesn't work at all. I mean, there's an obvious thing that's going on. There's
a stressor somewhere.
That needs to be addressed. Okay. Yeah. So those are the kind of things that you're looking for. And that's why sometimes, I talk about recovery. The stressor if somebody fails a training program is that obviously that's causing them a lot of stress and what's going to happen in the future. And then getting into that place of, how do we move forward and have, get to that place of acceptance of what's happened already. That's one of the big steps. But just to your question about coming to therapy, there's no reason you can, if there's something that is bothering you or that you would like to be explored, then there's no reason why. And maybe it's not, you don't necessarily see a psychologist or a counselor, but maybe, there's people, there's sort of wellness coaches or, there's that coaching side of things, which has also got a bit of therapy in it as well. So that might be something that would be, but you don't have to be at death's door to go to therapy, no.
So you see famous people have got a therapist on call. Is it a bit like having a GP or a chiro or a physio saying, I need to tune up, I better go talk to my therapist? Because
maybe, yeah. For some people, it really works that way. Depends on the type of therapy too. I mean, psychoanalytic therapy is kind of long-term, on the couch, twice a week, for years sometimes.
Is it?
Which really, and it's very kind of in-depth. For some people, they really love that. For other people, they will just need, 10 or 12 sessions and that's it, and they move on.
Go through a cathartic process, cleanse. I'm at the end, I can move on and get on with.
Yeah. So, and sometimes you don't really know what certain things that are part of your makeup that are making you do the same thing over and over again. So it's a bit of a sign. If you can see a repeat pattern happening over and over again and you're wondering what's going on there, it can be useful to go and talk to somebody about it. And they'll be able to reflect back to you.
Do you find yourself slipping into your old ways of being less mindless?
Oh, yeah.
And then, or less mindful, not mindless. And then do you feel when there's a point where you go, hang on, I've slipped here. I don't feel myself. I'm not happy with how I'm feeling at the moment.
Yeah. I think that's very human. I mean, the idea that you're going to get to this perfect place of
nirvana or mindfulness, whatever it's called. Enlightenment.
I don't think so. I think all the big things just become little things over a while. And as you age, you just feel these things just aren't as important as they were before. I can see when my ego gets in the way. The ego struggle for me has been the big struggle to get that out of the way, to recognize,
the previous flying ego or your new psychotherapy ego?
I think
or just ego in general?
Whole life, yeah.
Is it?
Where it just will be, I mean, you sort of get pretty good at it, but it's always there, very sneaky. You can come in the back door and when you're not expecting it. So that whole, it's if you're doing things to look good, to make a lot of money, I've kind of been down that road many, many times and just not interested in that at the moment. That's why I find something like volunteering like really enjoyable. And even there, there's this sort of the ego is already wanting to say, oh yeah, I'm a volunteer and I do work with the homeless and all that sort of stuff. But it's just, there's no, you're not doing it for the money. I don't have to do it. I can stop anytime I want, but there's something I'm getting from it that's very, very meaningful. It gives me a lot of satisfaction, a lot of pleasure. I get to experience compassion, which I normally wouldn't do, like physical, as in doing compassionate acts. It's just very, it's a lovely way to be. I read that years ago and thought, what a crock of shit,
Until you actually go and think, hang on, I'm going to go try this.
Yeah. Like, how do you, I was reading a study. I thought it was untrue, but then I read this study about, what makes people happy. And really service work is kind of there. So if you're doing something, I mean, even what you're doing here, you're giving something back to the pilots in terms of this kind of stuff. So that's really very, very powerful. And, I find it's the ego that's the thing that I want to be on top of all the time. I present better to other people as a result, I think.
Well, I'd spent no time thinking about this until I listened to the podcast you did with Mark.
Mm.
And then I went away and read one of the books you recommended. And here I am talking to you because I guess I've now realised that us as pilots, while we think we're infallible and we're, big and tough and those sorts of things, we spend so much time on our own. COVID, we spent a lot of time away being not who we were. We're awake in the middle of the night on the other side of the world. It's really important that we understand that we all do go through these feelings of where we don't feel quite right. So that's why I think I've just now discovered, perhaps, I'm not sure I'm able to sit cross-legged because physically I probably can't, and I'm not sure about my umming. And
that's an old, none of that is really necessary. I mean, these days you can go, you can do a course, an afternoon, morning, or day course, or a weekend course, or a week-long course, whatever you like. And, they have chairs, you can sit chair, and you don't have to. I mean, the old days used to be very, very strict. You would sit there for, 15 hours or something, don't move, all day sitting, crazy stuff. And now they mix it with walking, sit, walk, sit, that kind of, for an hour, you sit 30, 10, 30 or whatever. And you do whatever you can do. It's not designed to kind of break you. And a lot of people just sit in chairs like that or lie down or whatever.
So we're pretty comfortable with the armchair flying, the mental picture.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why we can't be comfortable in this, taking a quiet time for ourselves, because we've been trained for years and years and years of armchair flying, imagining what we're going to do. So why is it so difficult for me to go, okay, I can go and sit in that chair for 10 minutes and think about me and all these things that,
Is it difficult for you to do?
It is, absolutely, because I'm now wondering what time it is again, and, and I'm completely engaged, and I thoroughly like this. I want to talk about this for hours and hours and hours, because I can see this is going to make me a better version of me.
Yeah.
But it's just breaking that first step to run a marathon, I guess.
Yeah. And I think you've taken the first step. One of the first steps is to start reading about it. And the second step, which you also have, is this curiosity. And I think gradually it's going to start getting into your system. You're going to.
It leaches in, do you think?
I think so, yeah.
Does it?
I think so. And also, I mean, the world is full of ways to do it now. There's so many apps to get you started. So I think, but it really is all about yourself, or yourself.
The self, yeah.
Big S, little s. I mean, some people would say there's two types of meditation. There's or mindfulness. Mindfulness is basically, paying attention. Everybody can do this sort of, training the attention into the body, or improving your awareness, creating a greater awareness about what's actually happening, or seeing clearly, as some people would say. So if what's a good example? There's a good Eastern story, the 2 arrows story. So you get hit with the first arrow, which creates the pain, which is something that's going to be inevitable in life.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second arrow is your narrative about it, right? What the hell is going on here? This is so unfair. Why did I get hit with the arrow? Who did it? Blah, 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 blah. So that, narrative is the part of the suffering of the self that we can address, which is what mindfulness addresses. Same thing in training. If you have an option B, or you don't get through the training review meeting, and that's the pain of failure. And then the second pain as well, the system is screwed, and the training captain they had is a dickhead. Everybody knows that. This is so unfair, and on it goes, raging against the system. And that second arrow is really not going to be helpful in terms of you wanting to continue moving forward.
And of course, I'll remind everyone now that APA Welfare is available 24/7, and PAN, which is a joint between pilots and Qantas, some fantastic members in our cohort, our mates, guys and girls we fly with, are part of the PAN, being PAN trained. So if you need some help, please reach out. So,
yes,
your further journey, your academic journey, are you now at a state of enlightenment, and you've now stopped?
Absolutely.
What are you up to at the moment?
Floating up through the sky.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm doing a bit more work, more counselling work, with people that sort of can't afford too much counselling. So it's not volunteer, but it's I guess what they call it pro bono work. But yeah, so that's kind of enjoyable. And then I do some volunteering at, no, I wouldn't mention any names, but yeah, there's some other work that I do to help people. And then, there's the PAN work. And Vij and I have started this business to bring well-being to the workplace. So there's a fair bit going on. And I still like to do things like travel and have fun. So that's on the agenda. And you can do that, at our age. Well, not at your age, but at my age.
No, I can't.
At our stage in life.
So is there going to be a captain doctor at some point there? Captain retired doctor?
Somebody wants me to do that, or I was told but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot of work. It's more fun to just hang out. And I like the freedom that you have of when you're retired. You can pick and choose what you want to do when you want to do it.
We can be present rather than running away. I've got to get in the books because I need a PhD on something, when in fact, that probably won't change.
And there's too much ego there for me as well.
It's an ego thing. Interesting.
Yeah, the title. If I had a real passion about a particular project that I really wanted to explore, maybe write a book about or something, then I would move forward with it. But if there's no passion there, it's got to be about the subject matter. It's not about the title or about, it's just one of my little things I'm going through at the moment. And I find I get more satisfaction out of just sitting with somebody, trying to get them to be kind to themselves or, self-compassion. There's a lot of men particularly that don't even think about looking at themselves in a compassionate way. And even from the point of view of training, we know from the literature that self-compassion is correlated with a growth mindset. So this idea that, if you get to that place of saying, oh, actually, I did the best that I could do, and it's okay that I didn't get through, and it's okay that I feel like crap. It's okay that I'm feeling this shame, and I accept that this is what's happened. And then when you get to that stage, you're in that place of being able to take the next step of, okay, so what do I do next? And how do I move forward? And can I reflect on all the things that I maybe didn't do as well, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got that growth mindset. So self-compassion is very, very powerful in so many ways. And so I enjoy that sort of sitting one-on-one with somebody in the therapy environment and just sort of giving them back to themselves in a way that they're maybe, not because I'm smarter or, whatever, but just because haven't recognized that this is what's happened. They've slipped into this area of non-recognition, and they just need somebody to nudge them in a better direction that's helpful. Yeah. So that's why I don't know that I'm going to do a PhD.
So if we come back to a few key themes, that's a good one to finish. Be kind to yourself. That's okay, isn't it? To have some compassion, self-compassion.
Yeah.
Taking some time to realize it's okay to have a quiet moment, to just be still.
Notice what you're doing with your time.
Okay. Well, that's a far more educated explanation than what I was trying to get at. Okay.
Yeah. Pay attention. Maybe wake up a little bit before life comes along and gives you a big slap, because when that happens, it's almost, resilience is one of those things you want to be building up over a period of time.
Okay.
So, it's good to, we do that with training, right? This is the way we're trained in the simulator before we get out in the line. So same sort of thing. We
all share the belief that perhaps I'm here as an imposter to some extent.
Absolutely.
That's okay. So if we recognize that, we can, that's a big part of it, I guess, is recognizing that other people quite often feel the same way I do. But being kind, and there's help. There's someone to talk to if you need to talk.
Always.
Please pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Reach out if anybody needs some help.
And, the PAN helpers are pilots just like everybody else. And just having somebody listen who is going to bracket any kind of judgment they might have. I mean, that's one of the tenets of being active listening. You hold any judgments, or notice that you have judgments coming up, which is another interesting area. But somebody's going to listen to you, and oftentimes that's kind of enough for pilots, just to have somebody to talk to.
Listen, absolutely.
And they're in the same boat. They know, that's why we have, it's coming from, somebody's listening to you, but they're also got a similar experience to you. So they know where you're coming from to a certain degree. So that's very, very helpful. So, yeah.
Andrew, thank you for your time. It's always a great pleasure. I love talking about this. I didn't realize I would, but I do. And remember, if you need help, please reach out. And of course, stick with it.